Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome to Sankofa Video Books and Cafe, located at 2714 Georgia Avenue Northwest, right across the street from Howard University. And in the what is this? This is called the Pleasant Plains neighborhood. That's the technical name of this, affectionately known as the Uptown DC. So we have, my name is Kamal Grimes. I'm here, one of the staff members at Sankofa, and I've been tasked with the great opportunity and pleasure of interviewing Dr. Ian Smart, who has been a professor at Howard for over 40 years in the Department of World Languages, teaching Spanish and Spanish Afro-Latino literature, but also a very prolific author in his own right in English and Spanish. And if I'm not mistaken, you have at least 15 or more books, maybe 20 or more. Yeah. The author of 28 books, self-published, all of them self-published or most? I know you have a lot of self-published.
Most, okay. The first book was published by, it was called Central American Writers of West Indian Origin, a new Hispanic literature published by what is called, I think it was called Philippine Press. And then the next book was, the next important book was Kemet to Hispanophone Africana Literature, which was published by the by Original World Press. Original World Press. That's the press that I founded along with Stanley Cyrus. Well, he is died now. But this was the press. This was part of the Black Books Revolution. And then a key book was Nicholas Guillen, Popular Poet of the Caribbean, published by University of Missouri Columbia Press. And so, yes, and then the rest of the books were published by Original World Press, which is not, because it was self-published, it's a legitimate peer-reviewed press, but it's owned and controlled by Black people. So it's the saying is you can't have freedom of the press unless you have a press.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And it looks like Original World Press was the one who published this most current book that we're here to talk about today. And the title of this current book is What is Ukraine to Me? Now, this book came out earlier this year. No, last year in 2022. Now we're in a new year. So my first question is, so if you look at the cover of the book, you see that there's some Egyptian or Kemetic imagery on the book. So one, I wanted to ask, can you explain this imagery, and then what does ancient Kemetic imagery have to do with the Ukraine war?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I'm going to.
Dr. Smart, can you hold the mic closer?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you asked that because I'm going to read the back cover of the book, the blurb at the back. What is Ukraine to me? And I will read the entire thing. At the very least, 10,000 years ago, people from the heart of Africa, whom the ancient Greeks called Ethiops or Ethiopians, and quote, discovered while others were yet barbarians, the elements of the arts and sciences, and founded on the study of the laws of nature, those civil and religious systems would still govern the universe. And end of quote. That's from Comte Volney, who was a French intellectual of the same generation as your boy, the guy, what's his name, the famous one who was married to who was with the woman from the black woman. What's the name? One of the early presidents. I forget his name. I think it was that same generation. The same generation. He was a white. Frank Volney was a white French intellectual of that generation. At the end of the 18th century. So that's what he said. In this, the final stage of the UN declared International Decade for People of African Descent, which is 2015 to 2024. As humanity lives through the COVID pandemic and stares down the catastrophe of climate change, we now have to confront the Ukraine conflict. The question, what is Ukraine to me, puts the situation in a perspective that brings us back to the fundamental, indisputable fact of the African origin of civilization. So that's what Ukraine is about. The thrust, that's the direction that I take in the book.
So my second question is, can you speak on the Ukraine crisis from your perspective? What is the cause of the conflict, and what implications does it have for people of African descent?
According to the indisputable facts, um, the people who live in the eastern part of Ukraine, they are Russians. They speak Russian and they identify with Russia. In 2014, there was a coup organized by the United States under the control of a woman called Victoria Nuland, who's a high official in the State Department, who organized this coup openly and overthrew the president of the government in Ukraine because it was too friendly to Russia. And then the new government from 2014 began a campaign of genocide against the Russians, the Russian-speaking Ukrainians in the east. Eventually, there was an attempt to correct that. Putin tried to fix that, and finally decided that he should make a move, a special military operation, and to end this thing. So to bring the Ukrainian government to negotiate, but it didn't work, and that's what the war is about. That's precisely what the conflict is about. Well, that's how I understand it. So what does it mean for us? Well, the one a central element of the Ukrainian forces, of the Ukrainian army, these banderas, what they call Azov battalion. They're openly Nazis. They're worse than the Ku Klux Klan. They're worse because they actually continue killing people. They're Nazis. So why? So we have a Nazi. The Nazi element is strong in the Ukrainian government. Then too, as the South African president said, when we were fighting against apartheid, Russia helped us in South Africa, whereas the United States helped the white people, help them. So that's what we have to consider.
So now we know that the Soviet Union is no more since 1991. And how much is this current conflict in Ukraine connected to the historic conflict of the Cold War with the Soviet Union versus United States?
It is intimately connected. But the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia fell into disarray as it moved towards capitalism, free market capitalism. It got into all kinds of confusion. It became weak, and that was fine for the free market capitalists led by the United States, because they were ruling the roost. But then Russia brought itself together under Putin and decided to correct its course, to get back into, to move away from the corruption of the free market capitalist system. So what the question was what was the question?
The question is, how is the current conflict between Ukraine and Russia and the West involvement, how is it connected to the historical conflict of the Cold War, which we know is free market or capitalism versus communism. Now that Russia is no longer, a Soviet Union, that it seems as though there's still a connection between the historic war and what's going on now. What is that connection?
Well, the connection is that free market capitalists want to continue controlling Russia, and they want to move to push to surround Russia with these NATO countries, and so they would get Russia under their thumb, and Russia said no. Oh, when Germany was reunited, the commitment was made. The Russians agreed to that. The commitment was made to that NATO. There no longer any real need for NATO, and NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. But it has continued expanding to surround Russia, and Russia said that made quite clear that it would not allow it not allow it to be encircled totally by Ukraine becoming part of NATO, and everybody knew that, but they continued, and so this war is about stopping NATO, United States and NATO, from surrounding Russia and threatening its very existence. So that's what the war is about.
So you mentioned that during the apartheid in South Africa, that Russia was actually supportive. I remember Nelson Mandela mentioned that that Soviet Union were very supportive of the black South Africans who were in the armed struggle, and the United States was more supportive economically, if not militarily, to the white apartheid government. So can you tell us a little bit more about the legacy of Russia in Africa, and how should we view this situation? Should we be sympathetic towards Russia? Uh, should we just stay not involved? Or within America, United States, many of us are or have been pushed or to support Ukraine. So can you speak on that? Should we support Russia? Should we support Ukraine? Should we stay out of the issue altogether?
If we have to choose between Russia and Ukraine, we have to choose Russia because Russia has not been involved. When Africa in the Berlin Conference in 1880s or so, when the Europeans sat down and divided up Africa among themselves, Russia was not part of that. And Russia has no colonies in Africa. No, I'm not saying that. Maybe it's because they weren't strong enough, but the fact is they have no colonies in Africa. The United States is more of an enemy to our people than Russia is. That's the historical reality. So the president of South Africa said that made it clear that we have to that if we have to choose, we have to choose Russia because Russia helped us in the fight against apartheid, whereas the United States helped the apartheid regime. So we have to open our eyes. I mentioned this in the preface of the book. How ridiculous it was for the Minister of Defense, or the Secretary of Defense, a big huge black man, to go to Kiev in April and say that he was supporting he was supporting the Azov battalion, who are Nazis, who are worse than the Ku Klux Klan, because the aim is to weaken Russia, so that Russia, anything we can do to harm Russia, because Russia is not playing along with the free market capitalism. And by the way, Russia is no longer communist. Putin is an Orthodox Christian, In fact, it seems you're practicing Orthodox Christian, just like Biden has was practicing Catholic. So it's not a question of communism anymore.
So it's not an issue of communism anymore. So what is the issue? Is Russia, are they in free? What is, how can we explain the conflict and the separation of Russia with Western Europe? Why? What is the fissure between Russia and Western Europe? Because many people don't necessarily understand that, especially us. And I'll just say from a lot of uh, people in America and a lot of Black people don't necessarily know a distinction between white people. They say, okay, well, the Russians are white and the Western Europeans are white, so well, what's the difference between them in a sense?
Well, what's the difference between, for example, the English and the Germans? Remember in the first so-called World War, the Kaiser Wilhelm was the first cousin of the King of England. Yet these people murdered each other, assassinated each other mercilessly. So, and I mean, what's the difference? There is no. I don't know what the difference would be. The Russians were on the side of the English, right? The Russians were against the Germans, so who knows? These people just turn on each other and kill each other without compunction. So I don't know. No, the United States is in free market capitalism. They're in it for the money. So that's what it's all about. And they would like, Russia has a lot of oil and minerals and that kind of thing. And they would like to get control of that. And that's what it's all about.
It's about control of resources. So can you, now this war has been going on for a while now, at least a year or more, and I'm wondering, when you wrote this book, there's been some time since the book came out and now, so there's been some updates on the war. Are there any new perspectives or any new updates? Have you been following it, with the day to day, what's going on, and have things changed?
Yeah, I've been following it very closely, listening to the other side on the internet. There's a man called Ross, what's his name? Scott Ritter, and then there's a general Douglas McGregor, who are two American, they were colonels in the armed forces. They're giving to me an interesting perspective. But I made sure in the book to look at this thing from our perspective. What's in it for me as a Black man? We need to not get caught up in this struggle between these people who are here to kill each other for money. And so it hasn't really changed. There's no way Ukraine was going to be able to defeat Russia without the help of America and NATO. And as I said, as made quite clear that America was going to harass Russia and fight Russia up to down to the last Ukrainian. Now, according to these people who Scott Ritter and Colonel McGregor and Douglas McGregor, they're saying that so far there have been 157,000 Ukrainian soldiers who have died, who have been killed. 157,000. The Russians probably about 27,000 have died. Those are the figures they get from looking at all the data. It's clear that Russia at first was quite gentle almost in the invasion. Remember, they just sent the tanks in and stuff. They tried not to kill civilians, um, but now that's over with now because NATO has joined in and help Ukraine to fight the Russians. So the Russians are coming now with a major offensive, and they're going to annihilate Ukraine. But I didn't get into that in my book because I'm looking at this from our perspective as a black Africological perspective. Because I don't want that's the perspective that makes sense for me and for us because we have 2 billion people on the planet, and we have to look at things from our perspective. So yeah, that's what I look at.
So let's get a little bit into the book here, and get into our perspective. But before we get into our perspective, I do want to get into chapter one. Is titled "From Spin to Alternative Facts," and you speak about fake news and people having their own spin on things and their own set of facts. Can you speak about this phenomenon right now where you have you stated your ideas about why the war started, and it's very different from what you hear on the news. So how are hmm, how do we get reliable information, and can you speak on this phenomenon of spin and alternative facts and suggest ways that we can get some reliable information?
Well, remember, I used to think up until this war, I used to think that MSNBC was the was closer to the facts and as against Fox News. But now I realize that, that everything is a lie. Everything is a lie. So what you have to do is to look at these independent outlets and try and get up and compare that with the reality. For example, I always start with the idea. I start with the idea that the Western civilization is based on an absolute lie. The lie that was created in at the end of the 18th century when what Martin Bernard calls the Aryan model, when Western intellectuals, ideologues, in order to try to defend the indefensible, slavery and the slave trade, and the fact that they got extremely wealthy in the 18th century of slavery and the exploitation of our people. And so they had to create, and then they knew, everybody knew all along that the Greeks were civilized by Africans, by Ethiopians. They were called Ethiopians because they got black skin, and they came from what's now the Sudan. Everybody knew that, but that became a huge embarrassment for Western ideologues at the end of the 18th century, because how could you justify slavery, which was supposed to be based on the fact that it was supposed to elevate us from barbarism, when the actual fact was that we are the ones who brought civilization to Europe. So they created this lie of the Aryan model, saying that it was not Africans who civilized the Greeks, but it was Aryans who came from the north. Everything is based on a lie, and so we've got to confront that in order to find it. And up until for me, the idea was everything was spin. Everybody took the facts and spin them in a way that was favorable to them. But then openly, with the comment of Trump, they started talking about alternative facts. The idea was that there are no real facts. You have to decide. You choose the facts for yourself. And the Trump woman who was the Trump official said, hopefully that we have to use alternative facts. So what the problem is, what are you going to, you have to work hard to find out what's the real fact. I mentioned in the book that when I was growing up in Trinidad, I was born in 1944, so in the 60s I was really becoming aware of the world and listening to the news, trying to find out what was going on. And I was confident, I was absolutely sure that the Bao were awful terrorists, because that's what was presented to me by the BBC News, everybody got the news. But in fact, it's just the opposite. That was the British who were the terrorists. So we have to sort through all of it. So that's what I'm trying to do in my book. To sort. That's why it's important to see, to understand that the alternative facts are what rule the world.
All right, sounds great. Yeah, we definitely need to sift through the facts and find out what's real from what's not. Here, I want to read an excerpt from chapter 2, where it's titled The Question of Invasion. It says, on the 3rd of November, 1903, Teddy Roosevelt successfully orchestrated the, quote, independence of the province of Panama from the central government of Bogota, Colombia. This was the only way the United States could obtain total rights in perpetuity to a strip of land 10 miles wide right through the Isthmus of Panama from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The newest colonial power had thus come fully into its inheritance, capitalizing on the role and order established theoretically by Pope Alexander VI at Tordesillas in 1494 and affirmed through the Monroe Doctrine, Manifest Destiny, and the Platt Amendment. Strictly speaking, Teddy Roosevelt's move was not an invasion. The United States, simply with its gunboat diplomacy, made it quite clear to the Bogota government that they would have to contend with the military might of the nation to the north if they were to take action to suppress the separatist declaration issued by a coterie of young bourgeois activists, the emerging oligarchy from the Colombian province. Panama became a wholly owned subsidiary of the nation to the north. The Monroe Doctrine, Manifest Destiny, and the Platt Amendment were working excellently. The new nation, a small one of 30,200 square miles, was skewed right through skewed right through its gut by a strip of land wholly owned by a mighty foreign power, soon to be indisputably the mightiest nation on earth, with a landmass of 3,717,796 square miles. And then you go on to speak about a Panamanian. You have a quote from a Panamanian poet who speaks about this, this takeover. So, can you speak about this whole concept of manifest destiny, these various invasions that the United States have done, or even, like you said, this wasn't technically an invasion, but it was the threat of invasion, and how is it different when the United States is doing it versus when another country is doing it? What is the spin?
Well, the spin is that we're the most powerful country, so what we say goes. That there's no spin about that. Everybody's how can Russia invade a sovereign nation? Well, the same way that the United States invaded Iraq, and killed 1 million people. The same way that the United States invaded Panama was 1989 in order to get Noriega, and committed one of the most heinous war crimes that ever took place, because on that night, it was the 24th or 22nd of December 1989, when they supposedly attacked the headquarters of the Panamanian National Guard, which happened to be located in a slum district in Panama, which is called El Chorrillo. So 2 o'clock in the morning, these U.S. planes come and they bomb and they flatten this area. People sleeping in their beds, women, children, men, sleeping in their beds, and most of them are black because it was a slum area. And the next day they just shovel the bodies into a mass grave. That's what the United States did. That's invasion. They keep invading all the time. In fact, according to some estimates, they can try to invade Haiti again. So it's just they say whatever we say goes because we're the most powerful country. And if you don't if you talk against it, then we shut you up. But, that's why I was careful not to not to talk too much about this kind of thing. But I was careful to establish that I am looking at this thing from the perspective of myself of us as 2 billion of us as black people. You see, what nobody can attack us for that. We have to look at it from our perspective, and that's legitimate. So they can't call us Putin apologists because we're looking at it from I'm an African apologist. I'm looking at it from my perspective as an African.
No, definitely. I think that's very important to keep in mind. What do you say to people who, what do you say to people who look at Russia as an imperial power or colonial power? Maybe they didn't colonize Africa, but when you look at what they did to Central Asia and Europe in terms of the Soviet Union and after the Soviet Union fell, you can see the territory of Russia, that they controlled, it diminished, and you have all these new countries that sprang up, from the old Soviet Union. You have many countries now. So maybe Russia wasn't necessarily a colonial power in Africa, but they did have, they were a strong world power, especially on the Eurasian continent. So how do you distinguish between Russia and the United States when both are, very strong military powers that may have their own interests? And how do you sift through that and maintain African interests and not skew too much one way? How can we remain in our own Africanity?
Well, that's why I call the book What is Ukraine to me and who am I? I'm an African living in a country which was founded on the idea that I'm 3/5 human. That's what I've got to deal with. I mean, what Russia is doing in Europe, whatever. They look what the Europeans have been look at what Germany did to England or to France. They've been fighting from time immemorial, and they're fighting each other. That's their problem. Stuff in my problem is that I've been subjected to this evil system of white supremacy, and I've got to that's what's uppermost in my mind. So looking at the Ukraine issue impinges on me because it may lead to the end of the world because these people may start to go nuclear now. So therefore that's important to me. That's relevant to me. But everything has to be looked at from the perspective of what's in it for me, and that's all I do.
Okay. Speaking on from our perspective, you have a chapter in here entitled, let me get it right, Machiavelli or Ma'at, the Prince or the Teachings of Ptah. Now, can you explain to our people who are listening and tuning in, I guess those two different ideas, Machiavelli and Ma'at? What are those ideas? Where do they come from, and how can you explain that to our people?
Ma'at was the concept of justice, like what they call natural law right, and doing the right thing, justice and right order. And African civilization, this Egyptian civilization was ruled by that. That was central. The pharaoh. Everybody had to follow the laws of Ma to do right. The civil society was based on that, on doing the right thing. And if the pharaoh did not, and it was harder for the pharaoh because he had his commands. The commands were stricter. Because he had to ensure that the society lived well, that everybody was well off. The rich had to look after the poor. The rich could not exploit the poor. That was against math. But this concept is explored in the earliest book in the first book written in human history, which was a papyrus that was found in the late 19th century, but dates back to about 2300 BC, and it was a description of how to of how of, it was a set of instructions of a wise old man to a young prince, and if you contrast it with Machiavelli, who wrote who wrote his instructions about 1505, 1515 they were published, AD. There were instructions to a prince on how to rule, and they're totally amoral, totally amoral. Whereas Marx, the instructions of were absolutely moral. So we need to get back. Our Western civilization is based on Machiavelli, not on Marx. And so and of course, Mart is an African concept. She's represented, the goddess Mart is represented as a black woman because all the gods and goddesses in Egypt were black. That's instructions to us. So that's a way that's one way to deal with the Ukrainian and the crisis in Ukraine is to go back to Mara. It also is a way to deal with the crisis that we are facing of white supremacy, the oppression and the exploitation that we are suffering from.
I want to stick on this topic for a little bit longer because I read both of these books myself. They're very small books, both of them, and they're available at Sankofa. So you can go on our website. You can get a copy of Machiavelli. You can also get a copy of the Teachings of Ptahhotep, and we'll have them in the store pretty soon. But on the website, you can order them, and it won't take too long. But I was fascinated with the concept of Machiavelli because Tupac, he had an album called Machiavelli, and it was he started using the alias Machiavelli, and it was based on this book. And I think he did, that was kind of like an alter ego that he had where it was kind of like he was competing or basically being defiant against people who were his enemies and things like that. So he was, I guess, in a way trying to politically or outmaneuver them in a way and establish some sort of dominance over his enemies. So I know one concept that I read in the book Machiavelli, The Prince, in Machiavelli's book, The Prince, was it was a concept of when you're a king, how to maintain power through various manipulative measures. And the more I read that book, I realized this is how you see the political scene going today. So I would task anyone and everyone to read that book because I think you'll understand better what you're seeing in these political maneuverings. But one thing that he said was, you cannot oppress the people too much. You have to figure a way to hold them down, but they cannot lose all hope. You have to maintain some level of hope in the people that things will get better. Otherwise, if you hold them completely down, then they will rebel. They will rebel against you because they'll see that there's no hope. So I think that's the type of situation that we see today, really, where we are, most people are tied up with working and paying bills. Um, and they may have a lot of frustrations about what's going on, but they're able to, eat food every day and go to sleep in a warm, house or apartment or whatever every day. So, you don't see mass outrage. So, whereas, I think that was a tactic that came about since the 60s, really, because in the 60s, black people were really, you know, rebelling, organizing and really shaping to take down or at least to weaken the capitalist system that we live in. So that was more of a comment that I just wanted to mention. And the concept of Ma'at is true. There's the seven principles of Ma'at, truth, justice, order, righteousness, reciprocity, harmony, and balance. And Ma'at is also a metaphor for when we pass away, we're supposed to have the way it happened in ancient Kemet is that we had our heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, and your heart had to be lighter than the feather in order to essentially go to heaven or have a favorable outcome. If it wasn't, then the heart would be actually devoured by some sort of a beast that they had. So it's very interesting. There's within Ma'at there were 42. It's called like the 42 negative confessions of Ma'at. When you pass away, you're supposed to be able to say, I have not stolen, I have not defrauded the offerings, I have not done all these deceitful things, I have not killed. There's 42 of them, and many people have said, and people see a parallel between many of the 10 commandments and the 42 admonitions of Ma'at. So that was just more of a comment, just to add some light for some who don't necessarily know about these concepts. But I guess the central point that you're making is that we're living in a Machiavellian world that's set up by white supremacists, and what we need to do is to get back to our concepts like Ma'at, which actually speak to our experience. So my question for you, based on all that stuff I said, is what are some ways that we can get back to Ma'at?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do, let me start getting controversial now, is you can't have white supremacy without black stupidity. Okay?
That's a quote right there.
Yeah. So we've got to stop being stupid and to start to know who we are, and start to like look at math and understand these things. I can't all I can do is try to get people to stop being stupid. That's I can't I can't devise a policy or a system, but I can get if I can alert you to the fact that you see, most people don't understand that they're being stupid. They've been so totally fooled by the system that they accept these lies and these perversions or these distortions as in fact good. So we've got to clarify that's all I can help you to think. That's why I say, what is Ukraine to me? What I want to get people to start to think through the situation and understand what Ukraine is to them. I don't know if I was dodging the question or what, but that's all I can do. Alert people to the fact that there's a problem and we can't go along with the status quo. We can't go along with the things that have been presented as good and let me say another controversial, very interesting thing. Okay, let me say this. Chapter 18 of Machiavelli is shut the ruler, keep his word. And it starts off and it says, it's a good thing, we all know it's a good thing for people to keep their word. But history has shown that the most successful rulers are those who do not keep their word. And he gives the example of one of the best, the shining example for him of a ruler who lies, who does not keep his word, was the king of Rome, who was the Pope, Alexander the Sixth. Okay. You know, that to me, that's the kind of fact that we need to think about. No, I'm still a Catholic, practicing Catholic, even knowing that. But as I say, I'm a Catholic in spite of being an intelligent African.
Yeah, I know other people in that same situation as well. And there's definitely a difference between institutions and personal faith. And I think that people can make, a distinction between institutions and their faith as well. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit from the content of this book specifically, just to ask you, what is your process? You've written 28 books, and what is your process when you're going into writing a book? And how long does it normally take? How is the research process and the writing process and the publishing? How is that experience for you? Can you just give some insight into people who may, want to write books themselves, and how has that been for you?
Well, I write because if I don't write, I would do something crazy. So I need to write. How do I write? Well, I would get up in the morning. For example, the first what thing that I wrote was an article for the the school annual, high school annual. They asked me to write that, and that's the first thing ever got published. It was about the cadets. I was in the cadets, the junior ROTC, and I was the head boy, and the sergeant major in the cadets in that junior ROTC. And so I wrote an article, and people liked it. This was back in this is 1962. But then the next thing I wrote was my MA thesis in Mexico. It was in Spanish. But how I would after that, I would get up in the morning and write. In those days I would write by hand. I would make sure I write 3 or 4 pages every morning. And that's how I work. I get up and write these things. In fact, right now I'm writing. I'm just today an idea came to me. I'm writing a longer piece about it's called Caribbean as the center of America or something like that. And I'm looking at the whole question of the Creole languages. And it struck me that it's part of a longer thing. But just today I thought, something. Actually, it's in Spanish. So I said, let me take one of these pieces and do a 15-page article showing that this dialect, or this Creole, was spoken in Colombia, called Palenquero. People are taking the wrong approach there. That it is the fact that Palenquero exists is an indication of the African origin of civilization. In fact, I want to show that Palenquero is connected. The Egyptian language, ancient Egyptian language, developed from the south, from the place where the Bantu languages are spoken. And Palenquero is supposed to be heavily influenced by the Bantu languages, by Kikongo especially. So, we need to look at the whole question of Creoles and look at the relationship between the Creoles and ancient Egyptian, because they all came from the same source. So that's this is the idea's come to me. So I'm going to start writing, a 15-page thing, 15 page piece, I'm going to do that by the have the information. We'll do that by the end of this month. Because right now, if I don't write, I would might explode because I'm in a particularly what should I say explosive situation. I'll be cut off from I'll be unlawfully suspended without pay by the Negroes over there at Howard, and I'm fighting it in court and all that. But their approach is, well, we have the money, and we can drag this thing out till you die. So I've got to do something to protect myself from that kind of oppression.
So you did speak on controversy of what's going on at Howard. Now I know you were a professor of Spanish at Howard for over 40 years, and you're, like you said to everyone, you're in a current conflict with Howard. If you don't mind, could you speak on that? I know we spoke earlier. You said you're willing to speak on that. Can you explain what is this? What is the conflict between Howard University and yourself right now?
Well, it's basically because I speak my mind and I express, freedom of expression is central to the academy, to the university. I've always run into conflict with the upper administration, all of them from Cheek. In fact, Cheek once told me that basically if I don't like it, I should leave. But he didn't move to file. He just expresses disagreement with my position. All of them, understood it because they understood that the university needs somebody who will speak truth to power, and that's what the university is about. But this current president, who is going to go next year, I think, I don't think he understands. All he knows is Howard. You see, he came from Trinidad as a young man, 16 or 17. He started off, and he's got his BS, MD at Howard. He did his specialty in medicine at Howard. Then when he came back to teach, he did the MBA at Howard. So he doesn't know what he thinks Howard is the exemplar of the university. That this is what universities are like. But I, for example, did my first degree in the University College Dublin, Ireland. I did my second degree, my MA, at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, Mexico City, and my final, the PhD at UCLA. So I have an idea of what universities are like in the Western world. And I know that my behavior is consistent with what is expected of a university, what's expected of a university professor. But his approach as well. You're not towing the line and you're giving trouble, so we just get rid of you. So they moved, I think, without contrary to the established order, to the rules and regulations. But they have all the money and all the time, and they're going to keep fighting it in court. And so that's the thing. It's been 5.5 years now that we are in litigation, and I continue to fight because I'm doing the right thing, and if I did anything else, it would be a capitulation. It would be wrong not to stand up for the right thing. And writing helps me to calm my spirit. It means when I write, I'm making a contribution, and that's why I write.
So I have a question about, we mentioned that you teach Spanish, but we've been speaking in English this whole time. How many books do you have in Spanish, and do you typically translate your books into Spanish? Is there a Spanish version of this book?
No, if I'm going to write, it has to come out in many years ago. I was at a conference, and one of my colleagues. There was a black professor. It was in Spanish. We were going down to Colombia. We met on the plane and stuff. And he had written his presentation in English and was translated into Spanish. And I was appalled at that because if you're going to write in Spanish, you write in Spanish. You don't write in English and translate. So, in fact, my MA my MA thesis was because I was in Mexico, so everything was in Spanish, and it was I wrote in Spanish because you write in Spanish. Because the way I did the BA in French and Spanish. Um, in Dublin of all places. Those were my those were the majors, French and Spanish. So I did my first year at the university, I did French, Spanish, economics, and Latin. And then for the next 2 years, I did French and Spanish. So everything was in French or Spanish. So yeah, I haven't written. I finally wrote a book when I just did my MA thesis was in Spanish. And then I finally wrote a book in Spanish for the first time this year. It was published last year because it's time to write for it in Spanish. But if I'm going to write in Spanish, I write in Spanish. If I'm going to write in English, I write in English. I don't translate. I have to think through things and they come out in the language the book is going to be.
Well, this has been a great conversation with you, Dr. Smart. We've been here for about an hour and we've had a great conversation. If anyone had any questions, would be a good time to ask your questions. Let us know if you have any questions. I did want to take this opportunity to say that if people want to follow this issue of Ukraine, they can tune in to tomorrow on WPFW. Netfa Freeman has a show at, believe it's, oh no, it may be the archives. Okay, so you can actually.
Yesterday's show.
Okay, yesterday's show.
Really good discussion about the origins of the conflict in the Ukraine.
Okay, so anyone who's tuning in, you could actually go to WPFWFM.org and you can look up archives of the shows. There's a show called Voices with Vision, yeah, with Netfa Freeman, and it aired yesterday. But they speak heavily on Ukraine and the origin. So if you're interested in this type of topic and you want to continue from, a politically astute and not perspective, then you can turn the show conversation. Last question I'll have for you and to leave our audience with is, our perspective as African people, not to get looped in with the dominant narrative that's going on. Where do we go from here?
Well, we stop. We begin to think clearly. We stop, to put it bluntly, stop being stupid, and because that's the only thing that's going to save us. If we follow the dominant narrative, probably the whole problem will be solved with shortly because the way things are going in Ukraine, it's quite possible that somebody's going to make a mistake and nuke somebody else. And I think it's more likely to be from over here. Somebody's going to make a mistake, and then once the Russians see a nuke coming, they're going to end the world. So it's really there are people who are really concerned about this. So we do need to think clearly and to raise questions and not accept the propaganda. It's true, the other side, everybody gets propaganda, but we don't know. At least we need to look at the other people's propaganda and see what is the reality and judge for ourselves. So I would say we need to sharpen up and to be sharp. I'm not going to use that as a word. We need to be sharp. We need to be clear and think deeply. Okay.
And I think if all of us woke up as early as you and started writing 3 pages a day, it would help to keep our minds sharp and clear. As you said, you've been around for some time now, and this is something you've been doing for a long time. So you were able to get 28 books out, and some folks are still trying to get one. So thank you for your contribution to to literature, to intellectualism, and to our staying committed to our people, and reminding us that we have to serve our own interests and not get looped into other people's plans, right? So thank you very much, Dr. Smart, for being here and talking with us today. Thank you, everyone who's listening online and those who came in person, even if you had to leave. And we thank you again. We have plenty of events coming up, so definitely go to www.sankofa.com and check out the events. February is going to be really jam-packed, and I'm trying to get myself mentally prepared for that because we have to we have to conduct those events. But it's a great opportunity. So thank everyone for coming out, and you guys don't have to leave. Everything is still open, but we are going to end the video here. So take care. Thank you everyone for coming. Bye bye.